Hello, everyone. This is LV Spencer, and today's 15-minute logistics webinar is going to focus on the logistics organizational chart. As you got on DROs, you probably have seen multiple different organizations within the logistics group. So today I'd like to present with you just one that I have used. I'm LV, the logistics lead for the Southwest and Rocky Mountain Division. Feel free to contact me at any time, and on the screen you should see my contact information. What I would like to do today is go over the logistics organizational chart and cover some basic information on it as well. As we look at the organization chart for the logistics group on a DRO, there's a few things that we need to keep in mind. That it must be a very flexible organization, because we do need to respond to the different needs of the disaster, and so it's going to fluctuate based on the DRO itself, as far as the size of it, how many people are in the organizational chart, how many people will be involved, how many different activities are going to be involved, and so on. So the chart I will be showing you is typically the chart you'll have for like a level 3 disaster and above, where you would have a logistics chief involved in the DRO. One of the basic concepts that's been involving in the Red Cross and the re-engineering and the reorganization is a topic called the territories. And the territories are, I sort of equate them to the site directors. That word isn't being used anymore, but the territories are out there in front, as far forward as the clients are, and they're actually working out in that area. So the organizational of a DRO is really designed to support the operations and control of the territories. That's where the actual service is being delivered to the clients out in the territories. A DRO may only have one territory, or maybe a larger DRO where you may have 2 or 3, 4 or 5 territories involved. For example, I know in Colorado, during the wildfires and the flooding, they had up to, I think, 3 or 4 different territories going at one time, depending on where the response is needed. Some territories will be there for the duration of the DRO. Some of them will be there for maybe a day or two or so. So it just all depends on how we're providing support to the clients. So our organizational chart needs to be really heavy on the territory side and very light at the DRO headquarters site. The DRO headquarters role now is more focused on technical assistance and supporting the different territories. For example, one time I was on a DRO, and at one time I was at the DRO headquarters, and I was the only person, the logistics person at the DRO headquarters, and all the other people have been deployed out to the different territories. So we want to keep the DRO headquarters a very small operation and focus more on being heavy on the territories. And so the DRO headquarters is designed to support the territories. So now I'd like to go in and show you a sample organizational chart. This is the logistics group. And again, this is just a sample. It's not, firm, fast. It has to be this way. This is what I've used on past, and I'll just sort of want to highlight this. This is the organizational chart, and it starts off here at the very top with a logistics chief. The CH is a chief. And typically I'll have a person's name in there and the date that they depart, so I know how much longer they're going to be in that role. A phone number, so I can also use this chart as a phone roster. And then the chiefs and the managers will be given an email address during a DRO. And the way the email is constructed is it'll start with DR, which is disaster relief, and then XXX-XX. which is the DRO number. So it'd be like DRO 163-13, log 1. So in this chart, underneath the logistics chief, I've, of course, got the different activities. There's the facilities manager, there's the IKD manager, the LSAT manager, the procurement manager, then we also have the warehouse, transportation, supply. But another part that I have up here is the territory coordinators. This is where we would have a logistics person that would be leading that team that's out in the territory areas that are supporting the clients, and they would be coordinating all the logistics support for that particular territory. As you notice that there is no line between the territory coordinator and the chief. They have an indirect reporting. It's more of a coordination reporting. And you'll see that these territory coordinators will actually focus on the territory leads or whoever's operating that territory. So that's the logistics. Now I'd like to go down into each one of these different activities and give you a quick overview of each of the activities. So the next one I have is the facilities. Again, it's headed up by facilities manager at the top, and I like to break activities down into teams. So I've broken this down into two teams, an area team and an area team 2. And what may happen is that these teams may go out to a territory. So team 1 could go to territory 1, team 2 would go out to territory 2, and then if we have a third territory, we need another team. And they would be doing the coordination and the inspections and things for those different facilities out in those territories. So that's the facilities territory headed up by a manager, and then different teams. And typically a team would be made up of 3 people, a supervisor, a service associate, and a service associate who does the inspections and things. So let's go to the next chart, which is in-kind donations. In-kind donations more typically would be back at the headquarters, the DRO headquarters, and we'd have a manager and a supervisor and a couple of service associates to help out with there. But again, keep in mind, we need to be flexible, and if the territories are broad enough and large enough and spread out over an area, we may have some IKD people out in those areas as well, and then reporting information back to the manager. So there's the in-kind donation activity. LSAT, very similar to the facilities, as be a manager. I have 2 teams, again, depending on the number of territories, would depend on the number of teams we would have. So we'd have an LSAP supervisor and an LSAP service associate per team, and they would be doing their functions out in the different territories. The procurement activity, the way I have it organized is we have a manager and then a supervisor. And again, be flexible is that we may have multiple supervisors depending on the size of the operation. So we may have 1 supervisor, may have 2, may have 3, depending on the role. And the way I brought this out is I've in here got a service associate doing the request. As you'll notice down here, this service associate would be the request buyer. I'd like to put the request buyer in with procurement. There's no hard rule on to where that is. I think using request as a procurement function. Some people say it's a supply function. Then we'd have a couple of local buyers who would be out there buying things locally, doing pickups of local items and things. So that's the procurement. I still have a couple more I need to go through. Supply activity would start off with a manager and a supervisor. And then in here, it's a little different because they're very heavily involved with the tracker system. So what I've designed is having a service associate and maybe 1, 2, 3 doing the tracker, the supply tracker, and then another person or 2 or 3 that would be doing all the documentation, getting things ready to do the three-way match. So they would be dealing more with the files and things. So that's how I've gotten supply broken down. And then in transportation, we have the way I have that aligned is we start off with the transportation manager, and then I've broken it down into 2 sections. There's a transportation desk. That's the group that's when people are checking in their cars and out processing their cars and things, that they would be focusing on the transportation desk and putting things into the computer, the DRAMA's transportation module. And then I have another section that's headed up by a supervisor, and this section is the couriers and the drivers. I like for the drivers that are supporting the warehouse to come out of transportation. So some of these drivers would be assigned to the warehouse to support the warehouse. They may be assigned to be couriers, or they may be, just doing shuttles and things. And then another section I have in transportation is the NFO. Depending on the size of the operation, you may have a couple of NFO people, and they would be reporting to transportation. So that's transportation. And the warehouse is one of the larger activities as far as personnel goes. And the way I've got this broken out is I've broken it out with a manager at the top. And then I've got some supervisors that are going to be heading a team. So the teams that I've designed is one for inventory control, who's going to keep track of the inventory and do the entering of information into the inventory Excel spreadsheet. And then we're going to have a section that's going to be for the inbound and storage. These are people that are going to be offloading the trucks and things and putting things, storing things away. And then I have the last one here is outbound and distribution. So I've designed some pickers, and then I've also designed some drivers as well. Again, we need to be flexible, and depending on staffing and needs at the time, you may find people that are working in inbound one day, but the next day may be in outbound. So, we just need to maintain that flexibility of where people are actually working. So I want to go quickly over the territory logistics teams. This is where we have deployed people out to the territories out front to support those territories. So some of those people I've shown you on the charts would actually be physically located out in the territories and supporting the territory logistics team. So I've started it off with a logistics coordinator, and this is a generalist, and then underneath him, we're going to build underneath him or her an organization to support them in supporting the territories. So we would have a warehouse segment, we'd have a procurement activity representatives, we'd have logistics out there, an LSAP team, and then a transportation team. A couple ones you don't see here is the in-kind donation. Typically we wouldn't have those out there, and the supply would be back at the headquarters. But that's the way that I've designed it, and as always it needs to be flexible, and it can be changed on a as-need basis. Just keep in mind as we look at the logistics organization that we need to push people out to the territories as much as we can and as close to the client out there and supporting the other groups as best as we can. And then the DRO headquarters will be a very light organization that's there to provide technical assistance in supporting the territories. So that's the presentation for today, but one last thing I would like to remind you about is your hours, your volunteer hours. Be sure to have your volunteer hours recorded in Volunteer Connection. The time you've spent today listening to this webinar, you know, you may have spent a half an hour to an hour, 45 minutes, whatever time you're on this webinar. Make sure that that gets recorded as your volunteer hours, because we do want to show in Volunteer Connection that you are an active volunteer. And even though you may not be on a deployment site or actually doing providing support, you're doing some self-development by attending these webinars. That finishes the formal part of the webinar. I want to thank you for joining us. I'll be online for another 15 minutes or so to answer any questions that you may have.